This is Sarah Squires bringing you behind the headlines for today's edition of WYO Today Newsroom. Today, I am so fortunate to be joined by U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me again, Sarah. It's good to be with you.
Always a pleasure. Now, the conflict in Iran has obviously driven up prices at the pump here for Americans and in many parts of the world. And we're hearing kind of day by day these conflicting reports about talks with Iranian leadership and whether we're really making any headway there. What is the latest that you can tell us about the situation?
Well, I think that it's what so many of your listeners are hearing in the news. Obviously, Israel and the United States have had quite a campaign against Iran over the last 3 weeks. I am hoping that it is moving towards resolution, although I can't give you any kind of a timeline as to when that may actually happen. I am a supporter of the president and the decision that he has made in this regard. Iran has worked to destabilize the region for 47 years, or I should say the Iranian leadership. They have enslaved their own people. They have the toxic, I guess you'd say, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis that they have been funding and supporting and arming over the years, and just the terrorism that they have wrought around the world. And I've read numerous articles about the fact that we actually already pay a premium for fuel because of the terrorist tax, if you will, because of the Iranian leadership basically holding the Strait of Hormuz and other areas in the Middle East hostage to their malign influence and their activities. So the president is indicating that they are in talks, that they are trying to find a resolution that will provide more stability and certainty for the region, and I think that is a good development.
Well, we're definitely watching that very closely. I think it's impacting a lot of folks here in a lot of different ways, and so we're hoping to find a resolution, and as I'm sure you are as well.
Well, yes, I think everybody is wanting this to be resolved. At the same time, it is pretty amazing what Israel and the United States have been able to do so far in terms of really taking out so much of the weapons of war that Iran has.
Definitely. So turning the page here, I know there was a very important hearing yesterday at the Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources, where there was some consideration of your bill that is aimed at helping to remove some barriers for new coal leasing in Wyoming's Powder River Basin right here at home. What can you tell us about that, Representative Hageman?
So the situation is we have not had a new coal lease in the Powder River Basin for 14 years. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought that we had been leasing coal, but there has been such a concerted effort out of Washington, D.C. to destroy the coal industry. And so it has created some uncertainty with our coal mines and the companies that run and operate in Wyoming. And part of the problem is that we have what's called the bidding. What they have to do, they have what is called they have to bid for leasing new coal, and this is under the Mineral Leasing Act, and they are required, despite the fact that it can take as much as a decade to actually permit new mining. They have to pay for all of it in the first 5 years, and it can be tens of millions of dollars. So there's the coal under the Mineral Leasing Act. They have to, once they do the bid, the moment that bid is awarded, they have to pay 20% down the first year, and for the next 4 years, pay another 20%. But so they have to pay for it within the first 5 years, but they can't mine within the first 5 years because they're still in the permitting process. So what I've done is just extend that period of time to a 10-year period of time to try to better match revenue with expenses. We are looking at running out of coal by 2030. We had a gentleman come and testify yesterday from Wyoming, and he has really raised the alarm bells, as have others in the industry, saying we don't have enough leased minerals, enough leased coal right now to actually be providing coal into the long run, despite the fact that we have the reserves. So my bill is just to make it, we're not reducing the amount that they have to pay. They still have to pay fair market value, but we are spreading those costs over a longer period of time so that they are not going broke the moment they go into a leasing situation.
Well, obviously that would be incredibly helpful, in the dilemma that you spelled out here about, the availability of coal. Now, Representative Hageman, I think not every one of our listeners here might know the minutia and the details and the ins and outs of kind of what happens next. Can you sort of spell out to us, where your bill goes from here and what you're hoping for?
So, yes, I was very pleased that it was on the agenda yesterday for a hearing. So we had witnesses come in and testify. As I indicated, we had a gentleman from Wyoming who came and testified about my HR 7872, which would reform the Mineral Leasing Act as I have described. So the next point will be that we will go into what's called a markup. And so the bill will come into the Natural Resources Committee, and the various members of that committee will have an opportunity to propose amendments, and we will debate them. And then hopefully at that point, it will pass out of the committee, out of the Natural Resource Committee, and then we can get it some floor time, get it so we can debate it on the floor. Although I don't believe that this is controversial. I see this one as actually being supported by both Republicans and Democrats. I don't think that there's necessarily opposition to it. Some of the Democrats definitely don't like coal, but I also don't think that this is a controversial change to the law. Now, I could be wrong about that because there is hostility in Washington, D.C. to coal, or at least there has been, especially in the Democrat Party. But once it comes out of committee, then again, we go to debate, and hopefully we can get it on the floor and vote on it and then send it over to the Senate. Although, maybe this is something that they can be working on at the same time as well.
Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that one. Now, I want to turn the page a bit to kind of another stalemate that we're watching very closely in Congress over the Homeland Security funding. Of course, this is what's now really impacting TSA services for air travel. It seems to have hamstrung major airports across the country. I think we're all watching the television news, and we see those crowds, and it can be a little bit scary for anyone who's thinking of traveling in the next few days or weeks. Now, ICE has been deployed, it sounds like, to help relieve some of that pressure at major airports, but it's that funding of ICE that is at the center of this battle. Now, I'm wondering if you can kind of spell out what's happening right now and whether you feel that there's a compromise in sight.
I'm very frustrated. I'm very frustrated with what is happening in the Senate. We have already, in the House, passed the bill to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security, which includes the TSA and FEMA and the Coast Guard and other agencies. And the Democrats in the Senate are holding it up because they do not want to fund ICE, because they don't want, and they're now admitting it. There are at least two Democrats, one senator and one member of the House, that have come out and specifically said, we do not want enforcement of our immigration laws. And as long as ICE is going to be enforcing our immigration laws, we are going to withhold the funding. Now, the irony of this is we fully funded ICE in the One Big Beautiful Bill in July of last year. So really the agencies that are being the most affected are TSA, the airports, FEMA, if we have any kind of a natural disaster, it's going to be terrible. And then again, the Coast Guard. And here we are on a war footing, and our Coast Guard is not being funded. The people in the Coast Guard are not being paid. And that to me is absolute insanity. I don't know if there is a resolution on the horizon. Every once in a while we hear that there might be a deal that has been cut. And the next thing I know, the Democrats say, no, we are not going to do anything that allows ICE to continue to operate. One of my sisters actually was flying last week, and she waited in a line for 4 hours to get through security, barely made her flight. Lots of people are missing their flights. Denver wasn't too bad. And it's my understanding that since ICE has been deployed to various airports across the country, the circumstance has improved pretty dramatically. I'm hoping that is the case. We should not be doing things in Congress. We should not be doing things that causes pain to the American public. That is not our role. It is not our job. My job is to make people's lives better, not worse. And this is a circumstance where the American people, the traveling public, is literally being held hostage because the Democrats do not want to enforce our immigration laws. And I just think it's insanity.
You know, Representative Hageman, I was reading kind of the latest reports that I could get my hands on early this morning because I know this situation is in flux. And from what I've read, the latest Republican proposal would fund most of DHS except for the enforcement and removal operations of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but still provides funding for other aspects of ICE along with Customs and Border Protection. Now, have you heard much about this proposal, and is it what you would consider a compromise? Is it something you would support?
I have heard that is a possibility, that we could fund Coast Guard, FEMA, and TSA, and then use reconciliation to fund the remainder of the Department of Homeland Security. I would be supportive of that. If that is going to move us off the dime, I'm supportive of that if it's going to help the traveling public and get our hardworking TSA employees paid. That's the other thing that is so bothersome to me. We're going to be losing high-quality, well-trained individuals who are not going to be able to continue to work for the TSA because they can't afford to. Now, when I went through Denver on my way back to Washington, D.C., I'm going to commend the TSA folks that were working the line. They were in good spirits. They were friendly. They were courteous. I did not feel like there was a frustration. I obviously thank them and thank as many of them as I can every time I go through the airports. But they seem to be in awfully good spirits for not having been paid for 3 weeks.
Absolutely. You know, I've heard some similar reports here, and, you know, obviously we have a pretty small but mighty airport here, but lots of praise from folks for Central Wyoming Regional Airport here in Riverton. And I just want to give a shout out to our TSA agents working there with a smile is what I'm hearing. So thank you for your work on that. And we're so hopeful that we're going to find some common ground here and be able to move ahead on this issue. Now,
well, yes, I hope that we can get a resolution.
Definitely. Now, before we go, Representative Hageman, I know that there's been talk over the last year or so about some reforms to the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, and I know there's a deadline coming up, so folks really maybe need to pay attention to, whether they've got a case, if they've got something to file or work to be done here. This, of course, applies to Wyoming uranium miners. So what can you tell us about that?
So this is some of the reforms that we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill, and it has to do with what I refer to as RECA. And this relates to a certain population, if you will, of people who worked in the uranium industry and were exposed to uranium and have had medical injuries as a result, medical problems as a result. So anyone in Wyoming who has claims or needs medical care as a result of working in this industry, they have until December 31st, 2027 to be able to make claims. So I encourage, because I know that there are several people in Wyoming who have suffered medical complications as a result of working in this industry in the 70s and 80s. And so 60s, 70s, and 80s, actually longer than that. But I encourage people to contact our office if they have any questions or any needs. This is also included in my newsletter every week. We have information about the program and links to where people can go directly to find out what they need to find out to be able to apply for the funding or the services related to RECA. So yes, it is very important that anyone in Wyoming who has medical complications after working in the uranium industry, that they go to my newsletter or they can just contact our office directly.
Definitely an important issue for some folks. And as always, your staff is so helpful for folks trying to navigate federal programs like that. So thanks to you and your incredibly helpful staff for finding solutions for folks. Now,
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I'm very proud of my staff.
yes. So before we go, just maybe in closing, a question occurred to me. And I know that, these days, I think a lot of people can find themselves feeling very frustrated about the political divide. And it can be hard to even consider a compromise because that frustration just builds up over time. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, Representative Hageman, do you have any advice about how you approach these things that can be really heated and frustrating, with the goal of, accomplishing your goals, sometimes striking a balance, compromise? How do you approach that issue?
Well, one of the things is you cannot allow this to be completely all-consuming. And I think sometimes anymore with social media and the way that people interact, I think it becomes a very hostile thing to engage with other people that may disagree with you or that have a different view of the thing. So right now I'm looking out my window and looking at the incredible cherry blossom trees between my building and the other office building. You look at the beauty all around you. You spend time with family. You spend time with your friends. You engage with your community. And and by that I mean you volunteer and you go to school programs and to athletics and different things. You just cannot allow the things that are happening in Washington, D.C. to be all-consuming. Everything is cyclical. Things are going to get better. I really honestly believe that things are going to get better. We just can't let politics completely control our lives. And that's probably strange for me to say because it is everything that I do. Every day. This is my job, is to be involved in politics. But I can't let it, I don't let it control how I view the world. And I'm a very optimistic person. I do think that things are going to get better. I do think that the war in Iran will be wrapping up and that the people of Iran will finally be free after 47 years. I think we'll have more stability in that area of the world. I'm excited about some of the bills that we're pushing forward, such as the bill that we talked about today to improve the situation for our coal mines. I just constantly look at the good things in the world.
Well, those are wise words to live by, and I want to thank you for offering us that insight into kind of how you approach politics in this day and age. And I also, as always, want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak with us, to our listeners, and fill us in on what's happening on Capitol Hill.
Thank you, Sarah. It's good to visit with you.
Today's show is brought to you by Porter's Mountain View Supply in Riverton. Porter's carries quality grills built for flavor, performance, and durability. Whether you're cooking for a crowd or just firing it up on a weeknight, their team can help you find the grill that fits how you cook and how often you use it. They also stock a full lineup of grilling accessories, including pellets, charcoal, seasonings, tools, thermometers, covers, and cleaning supplies. From low and slow cooking to quick and easy backyard meals, Porter's has the products that help you get better results every time. Check out Porter's Mountain View Supply at 750 East Sunset Drive in Riverton or give them a call at 307-856-6066.